Good morning. First of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me here today. My name is Ana Garcia and I'm a postdoc at the Barcelona Institute of International Relations. And during the last 5 years, I was involved in different initiatives to tackle hate speech online in Spain. So I'm going to talk about that. If I have time, I'm going to be as fast as possible. So, as you all know, cyberhate is a growing problem in Europe. Proof of that is the activity by international European organizations such as the Council of Europe that launched the No Hate Speech campaign in 2012, and also the Code of Conduct signed by the European Union and tech companies last year. So, proof of this growing concern is also the trend to increase penal restriction of hate speech, particularly online. This is a tendency that we are seeing in many countries, and one of the examples is the case of Spain. So, as it was said different times during this forum, of course, there is a tension when you try to increase penal restrictions of hate speech. There's a tension also with the protection of freedom of speech. And I think the case of Spain, it's a really good case to illustrate this tension. So I'm going to start very quickly with a definition of hate speech. You're all familiar with it. It's a very wide definition. I use the definition by ECRI, of 2015. And I think the interesting thing of this definition is that as it is very wide, the recommendation of the ECRI really clarifies that criminal sanctions will only be used in very specific and limited circumstances. It says that the hate speech should be punished when it's intended or can reasonably be expected to incite acts of violence, intimidation, hostility, or discrimination. And the recommendation also says that states should pay attention to the proportionality of penalties. This recommendation also mentions the particularities of hate speech online. And it says that one of the particularities of the internet is that you can use it to propagate hate speech, but you can also use it to counter hate speech. So self-regulation must be the strategy that is prioritized by states. And the recommendation gives some examples, such as codes of conduct, monitoring projects, complaint mechanisms, and provision of training to counter hate speech. I'm going to go very quickly to the case of Spain. As in other European countries, messages that insult and denigrate communities are very frequent in Spain. I'm going to give you just one example to move on. After the Paris attacks, the hashtag #KillAllMuslims, matad a todos los musulmanes, was for a few hours the third most used in Spain, just to give you an example of this problem. So, as a consequence, different strategies have been put in practice in Spain during the last years, particularly since 2012, both judicial and extrajudicial. The most important judicial strategy was the reform of the criminal code in 2015, following also European obligations. So this reform puts various hate speech crimes together in Article 510. They establish very severe penalties from 1 to 4 years in prison, and also 6 months to 2 years. And then the more severe penalties, the 1 to 4 years prison, are for cases of incitement of hatred, for dissemination of materials, also for the denial of genocide crimes, so Holocaust denial. And also it mentions aggravating circumstances, such as using new technologies. And despite the fact it's really early to evaluate the impact of this modification, because justice is really slow in Spain, so we don't have many cases. I'm going to mention the international concern that was raised because of the judicial activism of judges in Spain, using the offense of glorifying terrorism, that is like a kind of hate speech offense, according to the argumentation of judges in Spain. And during the last 3 years, we have a lot of case law based on tweets. So this is all because of tweets of people. And so we have, in 2015, 19 convictions for glorifying terrorism on Twitter. In 2016, another 27. And this year, we have already a few, and one of the most notorious cases is the case of Cassandra Vera, which is this young student of 21 years old that was condemned to 1 year prison for some tweets about, it was jokes about the death of Carrero Blanco, who was the successor of Francisco Franco, who was killed by ETA in 1973. So some years ago, so she was condemned to 1 year prison. So these kind of judgments, there were like many cases, as you see as you saw during the last 3 years, have raised critical reaction by human rights organizations, particularly because of the lack of proportionality in penalties, and also because they found these judgments as politically biased. Just very quickly, I want to mention also a couple of extrajudicial strategies. I don't know what happened. Okay, put in practice in Spain. The first one is the online project against xenophobia and intolerance in digital media. This was a project launched by 2 NGOs, the United Explanations and the Human Rights Institute of Catalonia, with funding from the EEA grants. And it was a regional project. It was actually selected by the European Commission as a good practice because it launched a digital media watchdog with an original methodology to analyze, to capture and to analyze comments on digital media. Particularly, there were comments on pieces of news about Roma and migrants. And also, it developed a strategy to intervene on fora with counter-narratives. And it also measured the reaction of these counter-narratives in the fora of this digital media. I want to mention also another interesting initiative. This time, it was implemented by the city of Barcelona. The city of Barcelona organized this year, March 2017, the Barcelona versus Hate International Conference. With this conference, it launched a campaign that was visible in social networks and in the streets of Barcelona, and I'm going to show you just very quickly. This is the campaign. It was launched in Barcelona, and it says like "control yourself" on the net, and you can see it's pretty self-explanatory, the image. And I think it's a very interesting example because it's the second time in Europe. The first time was Strasbourg, that a city gets involved in countering hate speech online. And Barcelona is still working on this subject, and they're gonna launch a website, an informative website, also in English, with different resources to counter hate speech online in this year in November. So I can share it with you if you're interested. Just final remarks. Sorry if I was fast, but I want to leave some time for the discussion. Of course, it is necessary to combat cyberhate through all means, so also legal means. But I think the case of Spain shows that we have to be aware of the dangers of increasing penal restrictions, particularly because in countries with problems, let's say, with the independence of justice, this can lead to the political use or the misuse of the concept of hate speech. And it can also provoke the problem of the lack of proportionality in penalties. So really a jail penalty for a tweet, we can discuss it, but according to international regulations is going a little bit too far. Just to finish, just to stress that other strategies can be put into practice, and as the EC recommendation says, the strategies based on self-regulation are very appropriate for the internet. You have some examples there, like codes of conduct, monitoring projects, complaint mechanisms, and provision of training. This is my email. If you are interested in initiatives to counter hate speech in Spain, please contact me. I will be happy to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Please take a seat. And now we're starting the discussion.